This video is brought to you by Moft. A few months back, I shared my iPhone 14 versus Galaxy S23 comparison video, which covers all the key areas and has been received really well, which as a tech reviewer comparing two brands like Apple versus Samsung, well, let's just say I'm glad I survived it. No, but in all seriousness, in that video, I got over 2,000 questions from you guys. So for this video, what I've done is I've narrowed this down to the 10 most frequently asked questions about charge time, longevity, resale value, display flicker issues, and much more. And what I'll be doing is answering each of these questions in this video today. As always, guys, I will leave all the purchase links down in the description. But first, I am doing a giveaway on this brand new iPhone 14. And if you want a chance to win, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment with your Instagram username. And then follow me on Instagram at Dion Schuddeboom, where I'll announce the winner on June the 11th. So which phone charges faster? Well, let's look at both wired as well as wireless charging. First, the iPhone 14 will charge at up to 20 watts, where the S23 goes up to 25 watts. Now, both of these I was described as average, but the S23 does charge at up to 25% faster. Now, when it comes to wireless charging, they both go up to 15 watts, the iPhone 14 with MagSafe and the S23 using Qi wireless charging. Now, what is cool about MagSafe is that, of course, it uses magnets, and this allows for some pretty cool added features as well as accessories. Think, for example, those MagSafe wallets or those charging stands. At the same time, though, the Qi that the Samsung utilizes is more universal and, of course, also works on the iPhone. But these are both expensive phones, so the question is, which phone will last longer? Well, the iPhone 14 comes with the A15 Bionic chip, which is the same as last year's iPhone 14 Pro. This may be a one-year-old chip, but it will still get around 5 to 7 years of software updates and security updates. Compared to that, the S23 comes with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, and this is promising 4 years of software updates and 5 years of security updates. And this is interesting because this makes the Samsung S23 line the longest lasting Android phone, even more so than Google's own Pixel phones, somehow. But still, it does fall short of Apple's industry-leading 5 to 7 years for the iPhone 14. And this brings us to the question of which phone holds better resale value. Now, why is resale value important? Let's say you buy either of these phones and then later down the road, say 1, 2, 3 years down the road, you want to sell it, as this is a great way to subsidize the cost of a new phone. So the better the resale value or the better they hold their value, the more money you will get in return. Now, to calculate this, of course, there are many factors that come into play. However, what I've done is I've looked at the depreciation after 1 year of use based on the previous year's models from both. So both the iPhone 13 and the Galaxy S22, comparing it in the UK for sites like eBay and other secondhand websites like that. And what I've come to find is that the iPhone 13, after 1 year, lost on average around 20% of its value compared to the S22, which lost around 50% of its value. And this is a really big difference, so why is it so much better on the iPhone? Well, this goes back to the previous question about longevity. The iPhones have much longer software support and updates, so they will last longer, and therefore it makes much more sense to buy a 1, 2, even 3-year-old iPhone. However, with Samsung increasing the software support on the S23, I do expect it to hold value a little bit better compared to the S22, but will still be far from the iPhone. iPhones, like many other products from Apple, really seem to hold their value very well over time, more so than any other tech product. I also got a lot of questions about the weight, so which phone is heavier? Well, the iPhone 14 comes in at 173 grams, where the S23 comes in at 168. Now, these are both measured without a case, and this 5-gram difference is really quite small and is something that you won't feel or notice between the two phones in your pocket. But what I will say though, is in the hand, the S23 is noticeably more comfortable, and this is not because of the difference in weight, but rather because it has slightly rounded corners or edges going around the frame compared to the more squared off look on the iPhone 14. And as a result, it doesn't really cut into your palm as much and is more comfortable to hold and use. Personally, I do prefer the sharper look of the iPhone 14, but there is no denying that the S23 is more comfortable to hold, and the matte glass on the back is a nice touch as well. Now for this next question, let's talk about the displays, more specifically the display flicker issue on the S23. Now in many tech videos on YouTube, including my very own, the display on the S23 seems to kind of flicker where the display on the iPhone 14 does not. So the question is this an issue? Thankfully, the answer to this question is no. This flicker effect is not visible to the naked eye. In fact, I'm not exactly sure why this happens on the S23 and not on the iPhone 14, but I suspect this may have to do with the variable refresh rate that you get on the S23 and not on the 14. But we'll talk more about refresh rates in a sec, as this is an area where the S23 has a big advantage. But first, regardless of which of these two great phones you choose, it is important to protect it. And a great way to add protection, functionality, and power to your iPhone is with the Snap Phone Case and Stand Power Set from Moft. The Snap Phone Case is made from this premium vegan leather that feels so good to the touch, retaining that fine grain and leather texture. I also really like the metal buttons and the soft microfiber on the inside. Nice touch. The case is also fully MagSafe compatible, meaning it will pair perfectly with the Stand Power Set. Now this is really cool. So the set essentially consists of two parts. First, you have the wallet and stand, and then also the battery pack. And they use this modular design so you can easily customize it depending on your use case. For example, for most days during normal typical commutes, I will just use the case and the wallet and then bring the battery for travel days. The wallet itself is also made of this premium vegan leather material and holds up to 3 cards, which is perfect because I actually use Apple Wallet for most cards, so only carry 1 to 2 physical cards when I go out, and these instantly and nicely store in this sleek, slim wallet. And then what is really neat is that whilst you're using the wallet in the hand, if you fold it out, it actually also acts as a grip. But I'd say my favorite feature of this wallet is that it also works as a stand. So as you can see on a desk, this lets me prop my phone up in portrait mode, and then I can also rotate it to the side to have it in landscape mode. This is great for watching videos like this. But then to add power to your phone, this is where the 3400 milliamp hour battery pack comes in. Now, because it uses MagSafe, simply place it onto the phone and this will then wirelessly charge your phone, no need for any cables. And thanks to its super thin and low profile design, you can actually have it in your pocket charging your phone, or even use your phone in your hand uninterrupted whilst having the battery pack attached. This is especially great on travel days where even the iPhone does need an occasional top up. To me, these accessories add functionality to your iPhone and do so in a way that is stylish and practical. I especially love the color combo of this nice brown and blue, but there's many other colors available. If you are interested in the Snap Phone Case or the Stand Power Set from Moft, be sure to head to the links in the description and use code Dion10 to get 10% off your order. In my original comparison video, I also got a lot of questions about the haptics and the speakers. So first, let's take a look at the haptics. I would say that both phones are truly best in class when compared to their other competitors. But more specifically though, I will say that the iPhone 14 has slightly more depth in the haptics. What I mean with that is it's easier to differentiate between the different levels of vibrations, and as a result, you're actually able to feel the type of notification more easily before having to check your phones. You can sort of sense the vibration and know, oh, this is a system notification or an important message that you may want to check. But then by comparison, the S23 does have sharper vibrations, and this I think makes them more prominent and is especially good if you're wearing thick layers, as it will likely come through sharper or more apparent than it would on an iPhone. This is also great if, say, ladies, you have a purse, you'll be more likely to feel the vibrations of a notification on your S23. Actually, you know what's funny? On a table, I found the iPhone 14 to move more as it vibrates, so it will kind of vibrate towards the edge compared to the S23. And this is no joke, it has actually happened to me where my iPhone has literally vibrated its way off a table, thankfully falling on a carpet floor, but that could have been worse. So when it comes to the haptics, both have their pros and cons. Which is better? Well, I think it depends on the use case. Personally, I do still prefer the iPhone 14 thanks to having more depth in the vibrations, but I do think that for some, the sharper, more prominent vibrations on the S23 will be best. Let's talk about the speakers. Now, both phones have a dual speaker setup, so especially in landscape mode, you get a nice stereo effect, which is really great. And again, these speaker systems on both phones truly are amongst the best when it comes to the smartphone industry, something I would also expect for these price points. But looking more specifically at the two, I have found the iPhone 14 to have a slightly broader frequency range and also a wider soundstage, and this results in bigger sounding sound. I also found that the iPhone 14 is a little bit louder at max volume and has noticeably better bass. The S23, however, does have a lower minimum volume, and this is especially great when using your phone late at night and not wanting to, say, wake up your significant other. I have, though, found the sound to be slightly more narrow sounding when compared to the iPhone 14, and I found that voices at higher volumes start to sound a little bit robotic, not distorted, but not as natural as on the iPhone 14, which overall I do think has the better speakers. And this brings me to biometrics, more specifically the fingerprint unlock versus Face ID. Now, biometrics are super important on any phone as they are quicker and often more secure than using a traditional PIN code. Now, the iPhone 14 uses Face ID, and this is very secure. It is near impossible to replicate. It doesn't just use an image of your face, but instead uses a detailed 3D scan using those LiDAR sensors, and this makes it really secure. Now, Face ID is definitely far more secure than other face unlocks, including the face unlock that you get on the S23. I found Face ID to generally be snappy and quite accurate. I also like that Face ID now finally works in landscape mode, but I do wish it worked at further distances, and specifically also when my phone is flat on a table so that I could sit at my desk, unlock my phone without having to sort of lean forward to have it unlock. I also found that in harsher sunlight, sometimes Face ID will struggle a bit. Now earlier I mentioned that the S23 also has face recognition, but I do not recommend you use this as this is not nearly as sophisticated as Face ID, so instead I suggest you use the fingerprint sensor. The ultrasonic fingerprint sensor on the S23 is truly seamless, much more so than Face ID as it sits under the screen, so it's virtually not noticeable when you're using your phone, unlike for example Face ID, which, well, as you can see, cuts in significantly into your display. I found the fingerprint sensor to be accurate with around 98% accuracy, similarly to Face ID, but where Face ID can sometimes struggle with harsher sunlight, the fingerprint sensor can sometimes have difficulties if your hands are damp or to make sure you really get the angle of your finger right. I find if I point it inwards a little bit too much or forward, it will not unlock. That said, the fingerprint unlock on the S23 is definitely faster when compared to Face ID. So at the end of the day, which is best? Well, I would say both are strong, but from a security perspective, I would say Face ID on the iPhone 14 remains the winner, whereas in terms of seamless integration and speed, the fingerprint sensor on the S23 is best. Now, if we take a step back and look at the biggest differences between the iPhone 14 and the S23, many of those differences lie in the display, and the biggest display difference is the refresh rate. So more specifically, the iPhone 14 has a 60 Hz refresh rate, where the S23 has a 120 Hz refresh rate. But does this matter? Well, first of all, what is refresh rate? Well, refresh rate defines how often your display updates its content as you use the phone. So when you are scrolling through content on your display, this determines how many times per second that content essentially moves with you. A higher refresh rate typically means a smoother experience and a faster, more responsive feel. So with that in mind, the S23's 120 Hz refresh rate is double that of the iPhone 60 Hz. And the question is, how big of a deal is this really? Well, I think if you're not used to 120 Hz, the 60 Hz display on the iPhone 14 will be just fine. However, once you do get used to that extra smooth 120 Hz, your eyes have a funny way of adjusting, and then going back to 60 Hz just feels choppy and not as responsive. Believe me, once you get used to 120 Hz, you're not going to want to go back. The S23's 120 Hz refresh rate is just so nice to use. It is buttery smooth, and as a result, actually makes the phone feel snappier and faster. The way I see it is it is 2023 and it is high time for Apple to add a 120 Hz refresh rate to all of their phones, not just the Pros. Side by side, the display on the Samsung Galaxy S23 is definitely better overall when compared to the iPhone 14. Now, we've talked a lot about the hardware, but let's talk a bit about the software. More specifically, which phone has better or more customization. Now, this gets into iOS versus Android territory, a subject on which I can do a whole video. Let me know, by the way, if you'd like to see that. But for now, let's focus specifically on customization. Now, looking at the iPhone, iOS 16 in the recent well, not so recent, more like a year ago, but the most recent update, iOS 16 added new lock screen features, which allowed it to be customized much more. You also have new features for widgets that came not long before that, but it still doesn't go much deeper than that. And this is both good and bad. Good in terms of stability, which we'll talk about more next, But when it comes to really making your phone your own, options on the iPhone 14 are limited, especially when compared to Android. Speaking of Android, the S23 running Android 13 and One UI 5.1 can be customized to your heart's content. You get third-party themes, vastly more widget designs. You also get the Edge panel, which allows you to quickly open apps, including in split screen view, something you still can't do on the iPhone. Apple, please add this. And you can even add things like color palettes, which will match your entire phone's UI to the color of your wallpaper. The options really are endless, and this is great. And when it comes to customization, the S23 is the clear winner. But what about stability? Arguably as important, if not more important, than customization. So going back to the iPhone, yes, while it may have fewer customization options, but as a result, you get an operating system that is really well polished and just works. In fact, this is one of the main reasons why I still use an iPhone as my main phone. It is for its dependability and reliability. App crashes, bugs, glitches, these are rare occurrences on the iPhone when compared to any phone on the Android side, including the S23. I also found iOS to be more organized. You don't have 4 versions of the same app or 6 ways to complete a given task or function. You sacrifice some customization, yes, but in return you get an experience that is smoother and more reliable than any other. But that's not to say that Android 11 on the S23 is a hot mess. This is not the case. In fact, compared to the previous S22, I found the S23 to be significantly more stable and less glitchy. And this is in part thanks to having the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, which now for the first time is actually optimized specifically for the S23. And this shows. The day-to-day experience with the S23 is good. Again, not as fluid as on the iPhone 14, where Apple has been making both the hardware and the software for many years, but the difference is not as big as it was previously. Still, at the end of the day, the iPhone 14 is still the more stable and reliable phone. So that gives you my take on the top 10 questions that you guys left on my main iPhone 14 versus S23 video. To learn more of my thoughts on how these two great phones compare, be sure to check out the main video, which I'll be sure to leave linked on screen right now. But to summarize my thoughts on how these two great phones compare, you really can't go wrong with either. I think the S23 beats the iPhone 14 in some specific areas, such as the display, as well as customization ability, but also falls behind in others. Where by comparison, the iPhone 14 offers a really strong all-round package that delivers in all key areas, the strongest points being Apple's stability, ecosystem integration, and unmatched longevity. And this is why for me, my main phone of choice remains to be an iPhone. But Samsung is starting to tempt me. But I'd love to hear from you guys, which phone do you prefer and why? Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.